Well, welcome back to Money Meets Strategy. I have a special guest here today, Diet Harrington. Give you a little background on Diet. She was the director of finance of Angleton Danbury Medical Center, held positions such as CFO at medical research consultants, helped run the customer success team at a fintech that we both worked at, and is now one of the partners here at Strata Cloud and runs our accounting department. Welcome, Diet.
Well, thanks, Hunter. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, excited to have you. We got a fun topic today. We're going to talk about the backbone of growth, which is
Nice.
accounting operations, why they matter. So excited to hear from you because you run the accounting operations for our firm and for every single one of our clients, over 60 clients. So I know you have a lot of thoughts on how to do this and how to do this well. And so excited to, learn a little bit. So I guess to kick it off with first question, why does it matter? Why does it matter to have a good accounting operations? What are the accounting operations? Why is it important?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think breaking it down to the very smallest piece, it's a lot about process and making sure you're prepared for the growth that you're planning, right? Because it can be quite chaotic in your environment if you've not planned for that. So, and process can be from a people perspective. It can be from your bookkeeping perspective, reviewing financial statements, delivery of financials, everything counts as a process and it needs to be done consistently and accurately month over month in order to produce the results that your customers are going to need.
Yeah. What if you are, let's say if you're a new company and you're like starting to think about this, or maybe you've just been at it for a while and just haven't really prioritized, like what would be the place to start with like these processes? Oh, it's, are there some things you need to do internally to prep for before hiring a bookkeeper or before bringing on a firm, or like what's the place to start?
Yeah, I think depending on the size of the company and where you're at in your journey, it's often good to outsource that function out of the gate. One, you get a deeper bench of expertise if you're hiring an outsourced firm that can help you with this. It's not, quite as costly from a payroll perspective to have to go source and then, manage that person from, all the way through payroll tax. So it is often really helpful to be able to outsource that, get in some really good talent that is experienced and can kind of hit the floor running and be able to get your books in order and be able to manage that task without you, the owner, having to be involved in the minutia. I mean, that would be the goal is to free you up so that you can focus on, going to get that growth and leave the compliance related bookkeeping and reconciliation work to your team. And, ideally, it would be the outsource team that could do that for you.
Yeah. How would you evaluate? I got this question from somebody the other day. I thought it's a good question. How would you evaluate if the outsource firm's doing good? Like if you're the business owner and you don't know anything about the finances, or you know very little about it. Like what should that outsource firm be delivering to you every month? Should you be talking to them a lot, a little? Like what should you be looking at on a regular basis?
Yeah, good question. Absolutely, you should be getting your financial statements every month. That's a big one we see with our firm, with customers. They get frustrated because they're not getting that visibility into what's happening with their numbers on a month over month basis. So that one is really key. As far as how much involvement it takes, typically in the beginning of an engagement, when you're going to bring in an outsourced firm, you're going to have a little bit more engagement with them to help them understand how you like things done. And then once they understand that and can create their process around that, there should be less communication required on a day-to-day basis about bookkeeping matters. You should be communicating with your firm, or if the firm is strictly providing bookkeeping and then you have internal financial staff, you should be communicating with them much more frequently, at least once a month to go over your financials. But likely more because they're just going to be things that are going to come up during the month that may require discussion um, or assistance or guidance from you as the owner.
Now, what are some of those like guiding things that I should expect from them? Like when we're looking at those financials, um, I'm sure people have heard terms like cash versus rule versus needed gap. What should they be hoping to see from that outsourced firm? And I guess how should that firm guide you through that?
Yeah, I think the firm should be trying to guide them, if they are on cash basis, over to accrual basis, especially if you're looking at growth, right? Because in my mind, growth could very well mean more scrutiny from outside, potentially outside investors, potentially lenders that are really going to be looking at your books, and they're going to want to see accrual based accounting. Um, the guide to get you to that is, again, in my mind, a lot of it's process based, right? You're going to have to be good about sharing information. You're going to have to help the firm get third party access into all your sales channels and be able to record everything correctly on an accrual basis that may have been much easier to do on cash basis because if you're only recording your revenue when the cash hits the bank, well, it's easy to record every deposit as revenue, but it's a little more complicated if you're going to actually record it on an accrual basis and get the reports correct and record any fees associated with it in sales tax. And but again, your bookkeeping firm is going to know how to do that. You just need to work with them to be able to provide them the information they need to be able to do it.
Yeah. Why do you think maybe you could help explain, to an owner or anybody that's saying, why would it be important to even do their now? I get that question a lot too. Of seems like a lot of extra work, it seems like, a lot of extra communication. Why is it important? Why would it even matter?
Yeah. Well, bookkeeping is the foundation of everything, really. If you don't interpret all of your activity that is running through your bank account and your credit card into a meaningful report where you can understand what's happening in your business on a month over month basis, then you have no baseline to know, are you growing at all or are you going forwards or backwards? So you really need to establish that baseline of numbers to be able to monitor where you're going. And to get that baseline of numbers is is bookkeeping. That is where it starts. You've got to know that every transaction that comes in to for us, often QuickBooks, that's probably our primary, application that we use, but every transaction has to be touched and put in the right place, so that then when you're looking at your balance sheet and your profit and loss statements and your cash flow statements, 1, every transaction is accounted for, and it's all in the right place, and that's how you begin to tell your story about what's happening in your business, is you're looking at what's happening month over month as you move through this journey towards growth. Is revenue growing? That's often good, but not necessarily the best driver around how you're doing. You need to be looking at your margins. And until you can get the data in a usable format, you really are just kind of flying blind.
Yeah, I know we preach this to the staff all the time, and I always stayed at different networking groups and things like that, right? You have to have that like apples to apples comparison month over month. A
Yeah.
common example I always see is like payroll. If somebody's on a biweekly payroll and they're looking month over to month when there's on the months that there's only two payrolls in each one, and they're like, man, my margins are great is there's less payroll. And then they have that 1 month where there's 3 payrolls, and they're like, "Man, what happened to my business?" Well, smoothing that out, allows them to see that apples to apples,
Yeah.
uh, which is huge, I know from the CFO perspective, just be able to plan those decisions, be able to see, the profitability, and so, uh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What about a full-time hire? When's it time for somebody to leave the firm, jump into a full-time hire? Uh, what makes sense?
I don't know, Hunter. I really don't know. Like from the perspective of when does it make sense for a business owner to hire a full-time person instead of an outsourced firm?
Yeah,
Yeah. I think when you get to the level of profitability and growth that or complexity would be another, lever to pull on that. When it becomes where you're having to communicate with the outsourced firm because the level of complexity has gotten so high, that might be an indicator. It's time to bring that in-house, and have somebody on site that can be responsible for managing all those types of questions that keep coming up. So I see that happen a lot with firms or when they just get to a level of profitability, and they're anticipating continued growth where it makes sense to just invest in the position and have that expertise live in house. That would be another example I've seen happen with businesses.
yeah. Yeah, I also add I see this more and more with, I don't know the proper word for it, maybe like more like specific industries like construction, for example, where there's job costing involved. It's just easier sometimes to have that person on the ground right next to the owner to facilitate, okay, this receipt goes to job one versus job two, those type of things. A lot of times it's just easier in person, to
Yeah.
have that. So I've seen that with some more technical industries of like it's the runway of the outsourced firm, at least when it comes to daily bookkeeping, might be shorter than um maybe a service-based industry, for
Yeah,
example.
no, yeah, totally. I mean, that's another layer of complexity that gets added in when, you have to remember that what the bookkeeper sees when a bank transaction comes into the feed into QuickBooks, it may show a vendor name and an amount and a date. So there's really no way for the bookkeeper to know if that needs to be split between 3 jobs and what amount needs to go to each job. So when that complexity gets there, although there are softwares that could be used, but again, it just depends on how complex is it. The software is only going to get you so far, and if it becomes that complicated, where it's just too much, and there's just too much back and forth communication around how do I categorize this one transaction out of 4,000 that are coming in on a monthly basis, it just makes sense to have somebody that's gonna own that in-house and be able to provide the answers faster.
Yeah. What should people be looking at on a weekly basis? I talked to somebody the other day, they were looking at every single account on their P&L every single week and, like, the detail that was under there. If you're like a $3 million service company, is that necessary, do you think? Is that overkill? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's too much to be looking at that layer, that level of detail on a weekly basis. I mean, cash, obviously, you would wanna look at on a frequent basis. But there are a lot of times, especially with accrual-based accounting, where you may not even have been able to record all of the transactions that would show up on the P&L or the balance sheet until the end of the month hits. So oftentimes, if the business owner is popping in on a weekly basis, the books may not look right to them in the middle of the month, which is often reasonable if you're having to pull Shopify reports and record revenue at the end of the month to do allocations. So I think that would be a little too much of a deep dive. And there's also the opportunity that something could be categorized incorrectly. And I'm sure with most outsourced firms, as with ours, we do a very thorough review at the end of the month so that we're catching any kind of misclassifications that might have happened week over week. And we make sure those get corrected before the actual financials go out to the customer. So if they're popping in week over week, they may see something that looks out of place, and maybe it is, but it might add a little frustration to their plate that's unnecessary because it would be smoothed out for them by the end of the month.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So we're looking at monthly financials, accrual based so that we can see the apples to apples, right? That's the target. But what if somebody is well into their business journey and has done none of that? And they're at a point where they're, maybe several $1,000,000 in revenue in each year, and they have an absolute maybe mess of books, or, you know, what's the roadmap for that person to
Ye
maybe get to this target that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is you've gotta get somebody that's gonna be in charge of getting that caught up.
Right.
Again, whether that's an in-house person that you're gonna hire or an sourced firm, somebody has got to go in and then start reconciling all of the accounts, because essentially if you can't show a bank or a lender or an investor that your accounts are actually tied out to your source documents, would be your, your bank statements, credit card statements, loan statements, then the financials themselves don't hold the validity that they're going to need for somebody to lend you money. So it's great that you've got all that revenue showing on the books, but how valid is it, right? I mean, that's gonna be the question that somebody's gonna ask you. So, somebody is gonna have to go through and validate essentially all that activity to confirm that it's recorded in the right place. I mean, if you've been doing your books yourself, I see this a lot where business owners know enough about QuickBooks to get in there and record some basic transactions. That doesn't always mean every transaction is recorded correctly from an accounting standpoint. So you need somebody with expertise that's going to come in, reconcile those accounts, and make sure that you're going to be confident in those numbers when you're presenting them to outside sources.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, basically just start.
Right.
It's
Just got to start.
Yeah,
Hmm.
just start. Somebody assigned to it, get somebody working on it, work overtime to um, do that. And I could say, from working with some of our CFO clients, right? It's the first step, I would say, before hiring a CFO, or getting that CFO involved in the process so that they can lead the charge. But
Yeah.
it's that foundational infrastructure so that the CFO can walk in and even know what is going on in this business.
Yeah.
Where are my margins? Where is the bottom line? What's net cash flow? What's maybe a estimated value of the business? All of that, the backbone of all of that is those numbers, that you're talking about on an accrual basis. And it's very hard when we've had some customers come in when, they have some messy books and they want some CFO services. Sometimes we have to slow them down
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
say, hey, let's get some things in order here.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the bottom line is the CFO side is not going to be able to be effective and provide value if the data that they're looking at is not accurate data. So it all flows together, and a lot of times we'll see a company come in that wants CFO services right out of the gate, and we start looking at their books and nothing's been reconciled. We're gonna have to get in and do, a deep dive on that and make sure everything is valid before we would want to spend the CFO time to start getting in and looking at trends and developing goals and targets. Because again, you have to have that baseline and it has to be established that it's accurate and valid before you can even start looking into future goals.
That's absolutely right. That's the first step, and which is why we wanted to talk about it because it's such an
Yeah,
important step that people undervalue.
true.
They undervalue the importance of just having this good, reliable information so that they can even build upon that and begin factoring it into things in some form at a base level. And so, appreciate you walking us through it
Yeah.
and sharing your knowledge with us on how to, build out the accounting department. Any final thoughts that you'd want to leave us with?
Yeah, I think, for some business owners, I've talked to a few very recently that almost come in apologetically uh, and embarrassed that I'm gonna see their books, and I try to reassure everybody there's no judgment here. You're our best kind of customer because we can provide you the most value. And so I think a tidbit to take away is, don't worry about the state of your books. Know that you're taking the right step to get somebody started and to making sure that your books are going to be valid and usable for you, because ultimately that's what you need them for, whether it's for projecting your, forecasting your goals and what you want to do with your business in 5 years, or whether it's getting loans. The bottom line is you've got to have good numbers, and that has to start with the accounting bookkeeping processes. So just start. That would be my tip. Get started.
Nice. Well, I'll ask a few more fun questions to close. I haven't done this before. This will
Okay.
be a new experiment. What would you say is one of your favorite business books?
Favorite business books? Probably Traction. Yep. I like the process around it. I love the concept of getting the right people in the right seats. And, we've seen examples of that even with our firm very recently, that we've had to move people around because we just didn't get them into the right place. And I love the whole concept of it.
Nice. What are some hobbies?
Hmm. Love horses, hiking, love mountains. That's a good one. That's probably my top two.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Reading,
Very cool.
reading. Yeah.
Do you ride horses through the mountains?
I have, yeah, I did last time when I was up in the mountains, I sure did, it's a lot of fun.
That's pretty cool. I did
Mhm.
not know that.
Yep.
Well, cool. Well, appreciate you coming on, Dia. Appreciate you walking us through that. Yeah, we'll see everybody next time on Money Beats Strategy.
Alright. Thanks, Hunter.